I still cannot believe this happened to me, but it's my reality now. I'm writing this from Boise, Idaho, where my life was forever altered by a single bridesmaid named Brandon. That's right, Brandon, not a best man or groomsman, but a bridesmaid, and what he did would make your blood run cold. Growing up in the Treasure Valley, I thought I knew my neighbors, or at least had a good idea of who they were. You know, the usual suburban mix. Families with young kids, retired couples, and the occasional college student renting out a room. But then came Brandon, the self-proclaimed fun guy from New York who crashed our wedding party like a tornado in a trailer park. At first, I thought he was just another enthusiastic friend of the groom, but as the night wore on, his antics became more and more erratic. He spilled drinks, knocked over decorations, and generally made a nuisance of himself. My fiancé, Dustin, and I were mortified. We'd specifically asked our friends to keep things under control. As the night drew to a close, Brandon slunk away, leaving behind a trail of destruction and broken promises. We breathed a collective sigh of relief as the last of the guests departed, exhausted but grateful for the end of what had become a nightmare wedding. Little did we know, that was only the beginning. Over the next few weeks, strange things started to happen around our house. Tools would go missing, trash cans would be knocked over, and strange noises could be heard coming from the backyard late at night. We chalked it up to typical neighborhood shenanigans, but deep down, we knew something was off. Fast forward to the day before our actual wedding day, when Dustin and I were frantically trying to finish last-minute preparations. Brandon showed up uninvited, claiming he wanted to help with the final touches. I should have known better. As soon as he started reorganizing our decor and rearranging the seating chart, I knew we had a problem on our hands. "What's going on here?" I demanded, my voice rising in alarm. Brandon just grinned, his eyes glinting with mischief. "Just trying to make sure things are perfect for your big day, guys." Perfect? The man was a nightmare. I didn't trust him as far as I could throw him. That evening, as we sat down to a quiet dinner before the wedding, Dustin's phone buzzed. He hesitated, then glanced up at me with a mixture of confusion and concern. "What is it?" I asked. "Just a text from Brandon," he replied, his voice laced with trepidation. I took the phone from him and read the message. My heart sank as if I'd been punched in the gut. Brandon had sent a series of cryptic texts to Dustin, claiming he was concerned about our marriage. What kind of person does that? As I read on, my anger turned to fear. This wasn't just some harmless prank, it was malicious compliance at its worst. That's when everything changed. The words on the screen began to blur as tears pricked at the corners of my eyes. How could someone we trusted, someone who'd been part of our inner circle, stoop so low? The more I read, the more my world began to unravel. What I found next destroyed me. A series of texts detailing Brandon's obsession with Dustin, his fixation on becoming the center of attention at our wedding, and his ultimate goal: to sabotage our marriage. It was like reading a twisted manifesto from a madman. I never saw it coming. How could we have been so blind? As I handed the phone back to Dustin, his face reflected my own horror. We were both shell-shocked, unsure of what to do or say. In that moment, everything changed. Our wedding day became a blur as we scrambled to confront Brandon and put an end to this madness. We called our friends, our family, anyone who would listen. The wedding went off without a hitch, but the damage was done. Our relationship had been irreparably damaged. As I look back on that fateful day, I'm reminded of the destructive power of malicious compliance. Brandon may have thought he'd won, but in reality, he lost everything, including his reputation and any shred of humanity he once possessed. Boise may be a beautiful city, full of life and laughter, but even here, evil can lurk just beneath the surface. And when it does, you better believe I'll be speaking out against it, using my voice to warn others about the dangers of people like Brandon. Men who would stop at nothing to get what they want. This is my story, a cautionary tale about the importance of vigilance and the devastating consequences of letting evil go unchecked. As I stood outside the reception hall, watching as my friends and family filed out, their faces a mix of sadness and relief, I couldn't help but think about the monster that had just been revealed to me. Brandon, the man I thought I loved, the man who was supposed to be my forever partner, had shown his true colors. I remembered the way he used to make me laugh, the way he'd surprise me with my favorite treats and take me on spontaneous adventures. But all of that was just a facade, a carefully constructed illusion designed to keep me under his control. And now, as I gazed out at the sea of familiar faces, I realized that I had been living in a dream world, a world where Brandon's manipulation and control were normal. It took him revealing his true nature for me to wake up and see the reality. As the days passed, I struggled to come to terms with what had happened. How could someone I loved so deeply turn out to be so evil? The more I thought about it, the more I realized that Brandon's behavior wasn't an isolated incident, it was just a symptom of a deeper problem. Boise, my adopted hometown, seemed like a perfect place, full of natural beauty and friendly people. But even here, there were whispers of dark secrets, of hidden agendas and backroom deals. It was as if the city itself was hiding its true face, waiting for unsuspecting victims to stumble into its trap. I knew I had to speak out, to warn others about the dangers of men like Brandon. I couldn't just sit idly by while he continued to wreak havoc on innocent people's lives. So, with a newfound sense of purpose, I started sharing my story, telling anyone who would listen about the destruction that Brandon had caused. At first, it was tough. People didn't want to believe me, didn't want to acknowledge that such evil existed in our midst. But I persisted, using my platform as a writer and speaker to spread the word. I wrote articles and blog posts, sharing my experiences with anyone who would read them. I gave talks at local events and conferences, warning people about the dangers of manipulation and control. And slowly but surely, people began to listen. They started to realize that Brandon wasn't an isolated case, that there were others out there like him, hiding behind masks of charm and charisma. They started to see the patterns, the red flags that I had ignored in my own relationship. As the months passed, I watched as more and more people came forward, sharing their own stories of manipulation and abuse. It was a tidal wave of awareness, a recognition that these behaviors weren't just isolated incidents, but rather symptoms of a deeper societal problem. And at the center of it all was Brandon, the man who had started it all. His reputation was in tatters, his name synonymous with evil. But even as I felt a sense of satisfaction knowing that he had lost everything, I knew that my work wasn't done. There were still people out there, trapped in relationships like mine, struggling to see the truth. There were still Brandon's enablers and apologists, trying to downplay his behavior or excuse it away. So I kept speaking out, using my voice to warn others about the dangers of men like Brandon. And slowly but surely, the tide began to turn. People started to wake up, to recognize the signs of manipulation and control. They started to take back their power, to stand up for themselves and demand better. And as they did, I knew that I had played a small part in bringing about change. I had used my story to warn others, to give them a glimpse into the destructive world of malicious compliance. And even though it was hard, even though it was scary, I knew that I had made a difference. As I looked out at the city, now bathed in the warm light of day, I felt a sense of hope. Boise, my adopted hometown, might not be perfect, but at least we were starting to see the truth. We were starting to recognize the evil that lurked beneath the surface, and we were taking steps to stop it. And as for me, I was healing, slowly but surely. I was learning to trust myself again, to believe in my own strength and resilience. And I knew that no matter what lay ahead, I would always stand up against the forces of evil, using my voice to warn others about the dangers that lurked in every corner of our world. As I stood there, basking in the warm sunlight, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. It was as if the weight of the world had finally lifted off my shoulders, and I could breathe again without feeling like I was suffocating under the pressure. But even as I savored this moment of serenity, I knew that I couldn't rest on my laurels. There was still so much work to be done. The forces of evil were not going to disappear simply because I had exposed them and spoken out against them. No, they would continue to plot and scheme, looking for ways to undermine our efforts and maintain their hold on power. And so, with a sense of determination and purpose, I knew that I had to keep pushing forward. I had to use my voice to warn others about the dangers that lurked in every corner of our world, and to encourage them to stand up against those forces of evil. It wasn't going to be easy, of course. There would be those who would try to silence me, who would try to intimidate me or manipulate me into staying quiet. But I was no longer the same person I had been before. I had faced my fears and overcome them, and I knew that I was stronger than ever. As I walked back through the city streets, I couldn't help but notice the changes that were taking place around me. The once quaint neighborhood where I had lived for so long was now bustling with activity. New businesses were opening up, New people were moving in, and the old, rundown buildings were being torn down to make way for something new. It was a sign of progress, of course, but it was also a reminder that nothing stays the same forever. The forces of evil may have been held back for the moment, but they would be back, stronger and more determined than ever. And so, I knew that I had to keep pushing forward, using my voice to warn others about the dangers that lurked in every corner of our world. It wouldn't be easy, but it was necessary, and I was ready for whatever lay ahead. As I walked through the city streets, I couldn't help but think about all the people who had helped me along the way. There were those who had supported me from afar, sending words of encouragement and offering a listening ear when I needed it most. And there were those who had stood by my side, fighting alongside me against the forces of evil. I thought about my friends, of course, but also about my enemies. The ones who had tried to silence me, who had tried to intimidate me into staying quiet. They were just as important, in their own way, because they had pushed me to be stronger and more determined than ever before. As I walked through the city streets, I felt a sense of gratitude wash over me. For all that had happened, for all that I had learned, and for all that lay ahead. It was going to be a long and difficult road, but I was ready. I was strong, and I was determined, and nothing was going to stop me from using my voice to warn others about the dangers that lurked in every corner of our world. As I walked into my apartment, exhausted but exhilarated by all that had happened, I couldn't help but think about the future. What lay ahead? Would I continue to fight against the forces of evil, or would I find a way to move on and leave it all behind? I didn't know, but one thing was certain. I would always stand up for what was right, using my voice to warn others about the dangers that lurked in every corner of our world. As I collapsed onto the couch, my mind racing with thoughts of the future, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease creeping in. What lay ahead? Would I be able to continue fighting against the darkness that seemed to perpetually surround me, or would I find a way to move on and leave it all behind? I thought about all that had happened, the friends I'd lost, the battles I'd fought, the scars I'd accumulated, and wondered if it was all worth it. Was I really making a difference? Or was I just perpetuating a never-ending cycle of violence and pain? As I lay there, staring blankly at the ceiling, my thoughts were interrupted by the sound of my phone buzzing on the coffee table. I groggily reached over to silence it, but not before seeing who was calling. Alex. I hesitated for a moment, unsure if I should answer. Our last conversation had been complicated, to say the least. But something about her voice, always calm and reassuring, drew me in. I took a deep breath and answered the phone. "Hey," she said, her tone soft and gentle. "How are you doing?" I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. But there was something about Alex that made me feel like I could trust her. Like we shared some secret understanding that went beyond words. "I'm okay, I guess," I replied finally. It's been a lot to process. Everything that happened, it's still sinking in. Silence fell between us for a moment, and I could almost hear Alex nodding on the other end of the line. "I know what you mean," she said eventually. "I've been there too, feeling like you're stuck in some kind of never-ending nightmare. But I want you to know that you're not alone. We're all going through this together, whether we realize it or not." Her words struck a chord deep within me. It was true, I wasn't alone. There were others out there who understood what I was going through, who had been through similar battles and emerged on the other side. "What do you mean?" I asked, my curiosity piqued. "Well," Alex said slowly, "I've been doing some research, talking to people, trying to understand more about this whole darkness thing. And what I've found is that it's not just limited to our world. There are others out there who have been fighting against the same forces." My eyes snapped open as I sat up straighter on the couch. "What, you mean there are other warriors?" Alex chuckled softly. "Well, I wouldn't call them warriors exactly, more like survivors. People who faced the darkness and come out the other side. And they're all connected, somehow. Like a web or something." I felt my mind racing with possibilities. This could be it. The key to understanding what was happening, why I was still alive when so many others had fallen. "What do you know?" I asked, leaning forward in excitement. "Tell me everything." Alex laughed again, her tone full of amusement. "Well, let's just say that I've uncovered some pretty interesting stuff. There are ancient civilizations hidden deep beneath the earth, ones that have been fighting against the darkness for thousands of years. And there are people, ordinary people who don't know anything about this world, who are somehow connected to all of it." My mind reeled as I tried to process what Alex was saying. It sounded crazy, impossible even. but something deep within me told me that she was telling the truth. I need to learn more, I said finally, my voice firm and resolute. I need to know everything you've learned. Can we meet up? Maybe tomorrow? Alex hesitated for a moment before answering. Yeah, I can do that. Meet me at the old clock tower in town. Be careful, okay? I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I'll be fine. Thanks, Alex. As I hung up the phone, my mind racing with possibilities, I felt a sense of hope creeping back into my heart. Maybe this was it. Maybe I had finally found a way to make a difference. And maybe, just maybe, I would find a way to move on from all the pain and suffering that had defined my life for so long. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I felt like there was actually a future ahead of me, one that was bright and full of possibility. I spent the rest of the day lost in thought, replaying our conversation over and over in my head. Alex's words had sparked something deep within me, a sense of purpose that I hadn't felt in years. As the sun began to set, casting a warm orange glow over the city, I finally shook off the lethargy that had been holding me back. I decided to take a walk, clearing my mind and getting some fresh air. The streets were quiet, save for the distant hum of traffic and the occasional chime of a bicycle bell. As I strolled along, I found myself drawn to the old clock tower Alex had mentioned. It was one of those iconic landmarks that seemed frozen in time, its intricate stone carvings telling stories of generations past. I arrived at the clock tower just before midnight, the only sound being the gentle tick-tock of the mechanism inside. The air was crisp and cool, carrying the scent of damp earth and moss. I stood outside the entrance, taking a deep breath as I prepared to meet Alex. The waiting game wasn't my strong suit, but I knew better than to arrive early. Besides, the anticipation was killing me. I needed this meeting to happen, and happen soon. I paced back and forth, trying to distract myself with thoughts of what Alex might reveal tomorrow. As the minutes ticked by, I found myself lost in memories of my childhood. Growing up, my parents had always spoken about the clock tower in hushed tones, as if it held some kind of mystical power. They'd whisper stories of the ancient mechanisms and the secrets they kept hidden within their stone walls. As a kid, I'd always been fascinated by these tales, wondering what lay behind those imposing walls. Now, standing outside those very same walls, I couldn't help but wonder if Alex had stumbled upon something that would change everything. Would she reveal some long-forgotten truth about our city's past? Or maybe even the secrets my parents had whispered about all those years ago? The clock tower loomed before me, its stone facade seeming to grow darker with each passing moment. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I realized that tomorrow was going to be a day like no other. Just as I was starting to lose hope, a figure emerged from the shadows. Alex stood before me, her eyes gleaming in the faint light cast by the nearby streetlights. She was dressed in black, her long coat fluttering behind her like a dark cloud. "You're on time," she said with a nod, her voice barely above a whisper. I smiled wryly. "You knew I would be." Alex nodded again, her eyes darting around the area before settling back on me. "Let's get moving. We have a lot to cover." As we walked away from the clock tower, I couldn't help but feel like we were entering uncharted territory. The city seemed to grow darker and more foreboding with each step, as if it was holding its breath in anticipation of what lay ahead. Our conversation flowed easily, like a river finding its course. Alex told me about her research, the hours she'd spent poring over dusty archives and scouring the streets for clues. She spoke of cryptic messages and hidden symbols, all pointing to some kind of ancient power lurking beneath our city's surface. As we walked, the buildings grew taller and more imposing, casting long shadows that seemed to reach out and grab at us. I felt like we were being pulled into a world beyond our own, one where secrets waited patiently for us to uncover them. We stopped outside a small cafe, its neon sign flickering like a firefly in the darkness. Alex pushed open the door, beckoning me inside with a nod. The air inside was thick with the smell of coffee and smoke. The patrons were a mix of early risers and insomniacs, all huddled over their cups or staring into the depths of their own thoughts. We slipped into a corner booth, the vinyl creaking in protest as we sat down. Alex pulled out a stack of papers, her eyes scanning the pages with an intensity that bordered on fanaticism. "It's all here," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The secrets are hidden in plain sight." I leaned forward, my heart pounding in anticipation. "What have you found?" Alex smiled, a glint in her eye that told me we were just scratching the surface of something much bigger than ourselves. And as we delved deeper into the mystery, I couldn't help but feel like we were standing at the edge of something truly remarkable, something that would change everything.